This is the way it feels to move through summer in Lululemon. Iconic Align softness without the front seam. For our smoothest look and feel ever, summer won't know what hit it. Stretch your limits in the non-stop flexibility of the new Lululemon Align No-Line Pant in select stores and at Lululemon.com.
Welcome to the podcast No One Told Us, where we tell the truth about parenting and talk about all the stuff you wish you knew before having kids. I'm your host, Rachael, Shepard-Ohta, and today I'm so excited to welcome Jancee Dunn. Jancee is a New York Times bestselling author, journalist, and columnist known for her candid, humorous takes on family life, relationships, and health. She has authored several acclaimed books, including the one we'll be discussing today called How to Not Hate Your Husband After Kids. I know I have struggled in my relationship after kids, and it's something that not a lot of people want to talk about, but so many people experience. So I'm really excited to talk about this with Jancee today because she does such an amazing job blending humor and just realness. So welcome to the podcast, Jancee. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I'm so curious to just kind of hear, first of all, the title of your book is just beyond genius, but I'm so curious to hear about just kind of like your personal experience and what really prompted you to write this book.
Yeah, the title's a bit of a grabber, isn't it? And we did have kind of meetings about whether it was too harsh, and the marketing department at my publisher said, no. This is what you have to get. It can't be How to Love Your Husband After Kids. It can't. So my story is that I've been a writer for years and years. I've written about mental health for years and years and all kinds of, subjects around well-being. And I had been with my husband for 10 years. We had really solidified our relationship. We traveled, we had a great time, and then we had a baby. And I thought he's an evolved guy. We're gonna figure it out. This is gonna organically work out the way everything else in our lives had up to that point. And then when I had our daughter, our life just exploded, and I couldn't believe it because I can remember thinking, even when I was pregnant, like, really, is it that difficult? And plus, it's one. I'm sure if people are reading this, they're thinking, people with multiple kids are thinking, really, it was just the one. But there's something about that first time that really upends your life in a way that is unbelievable. And so we started fighting right out of the gate pretty much. And we just didn't stop. And our relationship started to disintegrate. And I thought, I can't believe I write about this stuff and I don't have a handle on it. And my life is unraveling. And so I thought, should I write about this? And what it also interested me is that this was still a really taboo subject. It's there's so much pressure on social media to be the perfect parent and #blessed and all of that. And I thought, is anyone else feeling this way? Everyone else looks, they post these pictures. They look well rested and like they're not, screaming at each other. And it just seemed kind of shameful to me. And I hated that I felt shame. But I also, I talk about everything with my friends and my sisters. I have 2 sisters. And I didn't talk about this. And I thought, okay, well, my radar went up like, maybe this is something to explore. So I did.
Yeah, I think it's you just touched on so many things that I want to talk more about because there is this like shame piece where we don't want to admit it. And the social media piece, I think for our generation makes things easier in some ways because maybe you'll feel less alone by seeing certain videos, but also there's just as many videos, if not more, that show you, oh my gosh, they have it together and I don't. I saw this TikTok the other day and it was this really gorgeous couple. They're, the wife is pregnant and she and her husband are recording themselves talking and they're like, oh, all the things we're talking about before we have a baby. And I'm just like, oh, bless their hearts. Like they are just so cute and they just have no idea what's coming.
Right.
And it's like, even with the best of intentions, like you said, like you have a very evolved husband. I do too. My husband is, feminist, raised by a single mother, like social worker, just salt of the earth, progressive in every way. And I still resented the shit out of him, even though he was doing everything I wanted, everything I asked. Okay. I couldn't have asked for a better partner, really, unless I was a total nitpicky psychopath. And I still had so much resentment. So I'm curious where you think the bulk of the resentment comes from. Because I don't think I ever hated him, but I did resent him very, very deeply and like did not like him for a lot of the postpartum period with each of our kids to a different degree. We have 3, but with one in particular that really, really cracked our marriage. And I'm just curious, like what your experience was with talking to couples to write this book and what you found to be kind of like those big triggers or problem areas for those resentments to seep in.
Sure. And I love that you are talking about the fact that your marriage was cracked for a time. I mean, just even since I wrote the book, and it was a few years ago, like things have changed a little bit and the dialogue has opened up a bit more. And I'm just so happy.
Yeah.
That you're sharing and others are sharing. Anyway, so it was a couple of things that my resentment was really just at a slow boil. One was that Tom, my husband, would say, "You're the expert." Now, I am not. You don't need a PhD to empty the dishwasher. I'm not an expert about changing diapers. I learned just like you. We were both starting from scratch. And there's this thing about, oh, well, if you have ovaries, I guess you're the expert. And I really I wasn't, I did a little babysitting. I wasn't the expert. And I see now with hindsight that he was frightened. He was very frightened. And he just wanted to kind of cede it to me so that I, because he just couldn't, he was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But at the time I was just mad. And also that in our case, his life didn't change that much. He still did everything he took up. The second the umbilical cord was snipped, he took up long distance cycling. So he would.
I'm with you. No.
Right.
No,
so
no,
he would
no.
pedal away for hours and hours, and there was just this expectation that I was going to hold down the fort. He would, if he wanted to leave at nighttime and meet some friends for a beer, he would just walk out the door. And this was my fault too, that we didn't talk about any of the nuts and bolts of caregiving before we had the kid. That was also the expectation. We were both freelance writers. The expectation was that if the baby got sick, I would take the day off and stay home with the baby. And so before we had the kid, we had sort of divided the chores semi-equally. And then after the baby, it all went to me. And we just backslid into a different era. And it was absolutely bizarre. And I was also at fault because I started just shutting down and being really mad. And I would sort of hate clean the dishes. I would like bang pots and pans and the cabinets. It's very satisfying. And and glare at him. Oh, he also took up social chess. So he was constantly on his phone playing chess with some guy in the Philippines. He was constantly either on his phone, oblivious. He could just kind of unhook from what was going on around him and do what he wanted. And he was kind of in a bubble. And so I got madder and madder, but I didn't really voice how I was feeling. I kind of expected him to read my mind, which was my fault.
Yeah. Did you ever bring up things in like a calm moment? Because I know that was always hard for me. Like I just would fly off the handle and flip out or give him the silent treatment or something like that. I was never coming from like a rational place because I was so tired and overwhelmed myself. So I'm curious if you ever brought these things up to him like in the moment, or was it just fighting?
Oh, same as you, because you have a hair trigger temper.
Yeah.
There's a million things going on. There was just no calm, quiet time. I would think, oh God, we should really talk about this stuff. And then I would read one paragraph of a book or open Instagram and then fall asleep, slump forward. There was no time. And, I would think, okay, maybe we should take a walk together, but we would have the baby with us. I would be fussing with the baby. And so, no. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. And it came to a head and this is when I really thought, I should research a book, is he and I were fighting, and our daughter, Sylvie, she was around like 4, I think. And our dynamic, I don't know about you, but I'm the hothead, and Tom retreats. He just like turns gray and shuts down and just can't deal. And what my daughter saw is mommy hollering at daddy, and she would jump in front of him and say, "Don't yell at daddy." And I would think, oh, thank God.
Oh, yeah.
I created this. And when I started researching too, I did the classic thing. I don't know if you ever did this, but I would be super sweet to my daughter and kind of like chilly to my husband. And it doesn't fool your kids. They pick up on this stuff. They know. Mm-hmm. So, at the breakfast table, it would be, okay, so Tom, are you going to pick her up at daycare today? Or no, you got something going on? What's going on with you? Got something important to do? Honey, do you want some Cheerios? Do you want some Cheerios? Here you go. And that didn't fool her.
Yeah.
And it was also not a healthy way to interact. And, there's research that babies as young as 6 months, researchers measured their brain waves when they heard harsh, argumentative voices, and they were having a physiological reaction. They, because I would think, oh, the baby doesn't speak English yet. I can call my husband a dickhead, but she was picking up on the tone.
Yeah.
And why would she not? And so the shrapnel hits them too. And I somehow really naively thought that I could just kind of make a corridor of hostility towards my husband. And that's not how it works.
Yeah, it really does set the tone of the whole household. And yeah, for me, I thought like, oh, we're fine because our kids are still little. Like they're a toddler and a baby. They're not aware of what's going on. And, it's like you said, they of course pick up on it. And I don't want them to look at me or remember me as being like that mean lady who's always yelling at daddy.
That mean lady.
So I'm curious, we're going to take a quick break, but I'm curious about the mental load and the amount of the resentment that comes from that piece, or is it something else entirely? We'll be right back. Summer is here, which means more sun, more light, and more time to do all the things that make summertime so special. And the number one thing you don't want to be doing all summer is spending hours cooking inside. That's where Factor comes in, because Factor's chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals are ready in just 2 minutes, taking the hassle out of eating well, especially during summertime when we are all busy with activities and travel and just don't have as much time as we do when we're in our routine during the year. Factor meals are perfect because they arrive fresh and ready to eat, so they're perfect for any active lifestyle over summer and beyond. There are 45 weekly menu options, so you can pick a gourmet meal that fits your summer goals and your tastes, and you never get sick of them or bored. You can choose from all different options and filters like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more. And Factor really powers your day, sun up to sundown, because they are so nutritious, and they've got everything from breakfast, on-the-go lunches, premium dinners, and guilt-free snacks, and even desserts. So your whole day is totally covered. My husband and I absolutely love these meals. They are so, so delicious. We've never tried one we didn't like, and I am absolutely serious about that. So I would love for you to try it too. You can get started at factormeals.com/no-one-told-us-50 off, and you can use code no-one-told-us-50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. One more time, that's code no-one-told-us-50 off at factormeals.com/no-one-told-us-50 off for 50% off your order plus free shipping. Factormeals.com/no-one-told-us-50 off. If there's one piece of advice I could give to new parents, it's to make your life as easy as possible. And one of the ways that I have liked to do that for the last several years since I became a mom is by using Thrive Market. Thrive Market is like your favorite health food store, but it's online and it's so much more affordable. And I'm talking premium brands like Primal Kitchen, Siete, Simple Mills. Everything's delivered right to your door and up to 30% less than what you'd pay at traditional stores. Everything that they sell is incredibly high quality and meets really high standards. They ban over 1,000 ingredients. I know lots of people are thinking about things like that right now. You can even filter by diet and preference, so things like gluten-free, low sugar, vegan, so you're not wasting time reading every single label at the grocery stores. I even stock up on some of my wellness favorites and pantry items, toothpaste. I love their diapers. Everything that they have has been so, so great for our family. I love it because I can get everything my family needs in one place, everything shipped directly to me, so it's one less thing that I have to think about and do throughout the week. You can also skip the junk without overspending if you head to thrivemarket.com/HeySleepyBaby. You'll get 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift. That's thrivemarket.com/HeySleepyBaby. thrivemarket.com/HeySleepyBaby. Jancee, you were talking before the break, and I think this is probably relatable to literally everyone listening, unless maybe you're in a same-sex couple, which I'm curious to hear more about from you as well. But for those of us who are lucky enough to be married to a man, I think there is this huge problem of labor inequity and mental load inequity. And there's a lot of great conversation happening around it now. I think in the last couple of years, it's definitely becoming more mainstream to talk about these things and to equalize that load. But did you find when you were researching that this was kind of like a main sticking point for couples that are in hetero relationships, or was it something else?
No, absolutely. And, the labor would default to the woman. And also in straight relationships, it's the woman that wants to change the status quo.
Yeah.
By and large. It's not the man. It's working okay for the men.
Yeah. And it's mostly women leaving marriages, right? Like most divorce is initiated by the women now. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And so that, until things change, it is sort of incumbent upon women in straight relationships to kind of make these changes. And that's frustrating too. But yes, absolutely. It was the mental load. It was the endless planning, the being aware of everything, going back to you're the expert. And also in my case, again, because I don't want to demonize my husband, like he, we were both at fault, and we went to many marriage counselors, both for the book and just in general. And, part of what I was doing is I was doing maternal gatekeeping, what it's called, where, you don't, again, in straight relationships, where you don't allow your husband you don't allow him in. And that's what I would do. Like, for instance, if he was going to give our baby a bath, I would stand over him like a buzzard and say, like, what? No, she's going to drown. No, you hold her head that way. And, so I was the self-styled expert. And also I wasn't giving him a chance. So it perpetuated the cycle of him getting more insecure and more unsure of his own abilities. I rarely left him at home with her. It just became, he felt criticized. He felt like I was scrutinizing him, which I was. And so I had to kind of let go of some of that control and see what I was doing too. But yes, absolutely. And what I always encourage couples to do, I have a couple of friends who are, expecting right now. I said, if I could go back in time and do one thing, it's so boring, but sit down and go over in a really granular way all the chores that you do and all the expected chores that you will do around your new bundle of joy. If, I wrote about this, but my husband and I, because it's really lovely that, when you're pregnant or you're going to adopt or however you're going to get a baby, thinking about what your life is going to be like. But all we thought about were the fun things, like names. We would walk and think, what are we going to name this child, and what toys we were going to buy the baby. And it was nothing practical whatsoever. And I really wish we had sat down. If I could have done it all over again, I would have, gotten something fun to eat, sat down at the kitchen table and just listed every single chore and divvied them up. Because one expert told me, and I never forgot it, tension arises when things are not clear. So make everything clear, as deadly boring as it is, down to who's taking out the trash. And then the hypothetical situations, like who's staying home when the baby's sick? Who can do it? Are you alternating? And then even, John and Julie Gottman, the famous couples therapists, they had a really good suggestion. And it was, when in the beginning stages, talk to your partner about 5 things, the way you were raised, 5 things that you would repeat, 5 things that you would absolutely not repeat. And that's a good way to kind of drill down what your values are. Because sometimes when you talk about values, it's not really, you don't even really know what you're talking about, or, you think it has some sort of, it's freighted with some sort of, I don't know, political, meaning or something. It's even questions like religion. Sometimes when you have a baby, suddenly religion becomes more important to you, or the traditions around it. Even your values around, do you want a lot of relatives in your baby's life? Or, I'm trying to think of what, we did it later, my husband and me. It was a really productive conversation because we hadn't really talked about any of that stuff in depth at all. So yes, that was a very long-winded answer to your question. You probably forgot what you asked me.
No,
sorry.
No, that was perfect. I think that is such a good idea, because I think when you're just a couple, you fall into these roles of each of you doing things and it just all gets done. And then the baby just throws such a wrench in it. But a lot of it too is like, you don't even really know what to ask or what to think about until you have the baby. Like so much of it comes up after. So how do you recommend couples kind of navigate these conversations? Because getting ready, I think, is a great idea. And like sitting down with some fun takeout and like just going through it all, I think is a great date idea for while you're expecting. But then there's inevitably things that come up that you would have never dreamed of being an issue, right? Like, so for couples that I work with and that my team works with, it's sleep, right? Like they assumed that the baby would just sleep, and that now they don't, obviously. And they have different ideas about how to quote unquote fix that, or what they want to do about it. And like I said, a lot of people don't even think about those types of things before the baby's born. So how do you recommend couples kind of like communicate and don't let those resentments fester after the baby's born?
Ask your friends who have kids. Ask them to supply you with questions. I'm telling you, it can be...
Good idea.
It's really kind of amazing. Even you have these kind of latent things inside of you that bubble up when you have a kid and are sort of clarified. Like maybe it's something about, you may all of a sudden have strong feelings about timeouts, all kinds of different things. So I would highly recommend just ask your friends who are in the thick of it to give you some good questions about what are their pain points. And say 6 couples, ask them 3 questions, and then sit down and ask them yourself. That's a really good way. Or if you have, brothers and sisters or something, I'm trying to not cheesily say I have a bunch of these questions in the book, but I do. I will keep referring to
No,
the book.
please plug the book. I have it on my nightstand. Everybody should have it. Yes. We talked a little bit about like the division of labor and the household chores and things like that. I know that that's a huge one, maybe the biggest one for why we quote unquote hate our partners or husbands after the birth of a new baby. But what are some of the other things? I know intimacy comes up a lot. What are some of the other things that come into play more after having a kid?
Intimacy for sure. And it can be hard to talk about that issue, can't it? There are so many really personal things around it, your body image, and you're afraid it's going to hurt. There's all kinds of things. There's research that couples that fight about their sex life have a better sex life because at least they're talking about it. From all the sex therapists that I interviewed for this book, every single one said, you have to talk about it. You're not going to want to. You absolutely must. It was funny for us. Tom, I was afraid it was going to hurt. And so I was just putting it off. I wasn't feeling too great about myself physically. I felt very loose and floppy and just not. And I
relatable,
right. And so I just found a lot of excuses, and also I was tired. And so he did this funny thing. This is very specific, but because he was sort of more into the idea, I said, listen, if you can carve out an extra half an hour, this is what I landed on with a lot of different therapists, is that you're calculating that time in your head. If it's at nighttime, especially, you're calculating in your head, if we get rolling now, I'm going to lose out on some sleep in the morning. Like sleep underpins everything.
Like I could be sleeping right now. Make it quick. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I remember when our daughter got a little older and she was a toddler, I said, give me an extra half an hour, great. I'm very much in. Because she couldn't tell time yet, he would he sped up the entire like feeding time and watching TV, whatever she was watching at the time. And he put her to bed earlier. It might have been daylight out. And he carved that extra half an hour. I said, great.
You got to give it to him.
Right. And, so we really, you have to zone in on what is your absolute main issue. And for me, I swear it was even beyond like the body stuff or the fear, it was time management.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, that I can do. But other ones were just fighting effectively. Like there's a formula to it. And it's tough when you're in the thick of it and you're angry or you're tired and your temper gets the best of you. But fighting effectively, which is also good modeling behavior, of course, for your children to see, right? Because fighting isn't the problem. There's conflict in every relationship. It's how you do it. Mm-hmm. And if they can see you do it effectively, that both of you have a conflict and you work it out, that is good for them to see because it's going to happen in their lives too, right? So we had to sort of teach ourselves, with the help of experts to fight in a grown-up way. Yeah. And not like we were the two toddlers.
Yeah, it's a lot easier said than done, though, isn't it? Like, I just can go for the jugular sometimes when I'm mad and tired and say things I don't mean. And then he's like, ouch, that was not necessary. Yeah. Right. But I think also the point about making sure that, obviously you don't want to have all of your adult conversations or fights in front of your kid. But if they only see the fighting part and they never see the resolution part, that can be not good, too. So I like that you kind of normalize that idea of like making up and making sure that they see the resolution and healthy disagreement and healthy fighting and all of that. I think it's super important.
We saw Terry Real, who's really one of my favorite therapists. And, he's written many books. And he was saying that relationships are all in one of three stages. I think about this a lot. And it's harmony, disharmony, and repair. Mm. And those three stages can get a little messy, can't they? But I always think about the repair part. Mm-hmm. And yes, after a while, when we were back on track, now we've been married for 2001. We've been married for 24 years and we got through it. Wow. And now we're in kind of our soft era where it's really nice. We've been doing this for so many years and using, what the experts said. Even now, sometimes if we're having a disagreement, like Terry Real's face will like pop up on my shoulder, boop, and I can hear him talking to us. And so putting all that stuff in place, it really did help. It's just hard. It just is. And then you feel shame afterwards and you try to give yourself a break. And the reason why I started writing the book and why I said, we should start seeing these therapists, I feel so sad saying this, is that I thought, we're ruining our kid. She's, I had read all this research and I saw that she was siding with my husband and I was the hothead. And I thought, I certainly don't want to, ruin her life. We should fix this. Now with hindsight, I look back and think, wait, didn't it upset me that our marriage was in the toilet? Like that's the foundation for everything. And, this guy that I loved so much, that was how kid focused I was. And that was also a problem of my making.
Yeah. That I feel like is a huge mic drop. And I actually, now that you say that, I do remember having certain moments in our like lowest point where I would have been like, I don't even care. Like if we make it or not, like I'm fine. I'm good. Like I can do this by myself. Yeah. And that probably would have been a good time for us to get into therapy. And I'm going to ask you about that when we come back from this next break. We'll be right back.
With a Venmo debit card, you can Venmo more than just your friends. You can use your balance in so many ways. You can Venmo everything. Need gas? You can Venmo this. How about snacks? You can Venmo that. Your favorite band's merch? You can Venmo this. Or their next show? You can Venmo that. Visit Venmo.me/debit to learn more.
You can Venmo this, or you can Venmo that. You can Venmo this, or you can Venmo that. You can Venmo.
The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated. Card may be used everywhere MasterCard is accepted. Venmo purchase restrictions apply.
Don't miss Blinds.com's 4th of July mega sale happening now. Save up to 50%, plus get a free professional measure. Blinds.com invented a better way to shop for window treatments with upfront pricing, no showroom markups, and no salespeople in your home. Choose from classic shutters to outdoor shades and more, all backed by our 100% satisfaction guarantee. Don't miss Blinds.com's 4th of July mega sale. Save up to 50%, plus get a free measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So you talk to a lot of therapists for this book, and I'm curious what your recommendation is or what your experience is with couples therapy. Like, is there a time when you should say, oh, it's time for therapy, like we should definitely get some help, or is it different for everyone, or is it just something that like anybody would benefit from?
I think anyone would benefit from it. I really do. And I know it's not cheap. And if nothing else, many therapists have written good books. There's YouTube tutorials, but having somebody, a third party that isn't one of your friends, that's like, you're right, he's wrong, or your mother, forensically examine your relationship is incredibly helpful. And it can also be a relief. It can also be a relief even when they call you on your own bad behavior. You think, all right, okay, yeah, true. So, I mean, I can think of specific exercises that have helped me every single year of my relationship. I remember we went to this one therapist in New York City, and his name was Guy Winch. He's the co-host of the Dear Therapist podcast, but we went to him back in the day. And I remember one exercise that he gave to sort of bring us back to each other is he said, I would love for you to here's homework for your next session. Write down 10 things that your partner has done for you that you really appreciate. And I said, so wait, not like characteristics like, oh, he's funny, which he is. And he said, no, actions, because you can talk about stuff all you want, but actions really show how you care and sometimes why. And so we came, and he said, keep it a secret from each other. So we wrote down 10 things. And I remember one of the things that I wrote down that Tom had done for me is that he painted my parents' house, the outside of my parents' house. Not his parents, my parents, his in-laws. At the time we lived in Brooklyn, and he would drive out to New Jersey and get on a rickety ladder. There was a hornet's nest in my parents' roof, and he would paint weekend after weekend their house. And in the rush of raising the baby and just everything that was going on, because we both had 2 full-time jobs, that just blew by me. Like, it is bizarre. And then he wrote down a bunch of things too. So we go to Dr. Winch and we said, okay, so do we read these to you? And he said, no, you read them to each other. Very simple exercise. You write down the 10 actions. And then so I picked up the piece of paper and I grew weirdly shy. And I read these things. And when I read, you painted my parents' house, I started crying. And I thought, oh my God, that's really lovely. And I didn't even acknowledge that you had done that. And then he went through his 10, and his last one was, you're my best friend. And he never said that to me in my life. And I thought, wait, I am? And so we were both crying. It doesn't cost anything. I mean, well, the session costs money, but like,
but you're giving this for free.
Yeah, not you. And, this is something that you can do to sort of remind yourself of who you married, why you had them impregnate you in the first place, right? Like, come on. And that really helped. And Terry Real, he told me something that was deadly. It absolutely made me stop yelling at my husband in front of our daughter. And it was this. He said to me during we had this marriage intensive that lasted for a week. And he said, next time you feel the urge to yell at your husband in front of your child, I want you to take a picture of her and put it in your bedside drawer. And then take out the picture when you're about to yell and say, I know that what I'm about to do is going to cause you harm, but right now, my anger is more important to me than you are.
Whoa.
Uh-huh.
Whoa.
So I said that about twice, and then I never yelled at him in front of my kid again. And Terry Real, he's in Boston. We had to go to Boston. That was another huge turning point for us because, he does this thing called relational life therapy, and they take sides, and they are really blunt with you. And it was intense. And he really gave Tom the business, which was very satisfying. And then he turned to me and gave me the business. And he said, "You are real comfortable being self-righteous, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I kind of am." And he said, "It feels," this is one thing I always remember too, when I'm like hate cleaning the kitchen, I'm feeling self-righteous. And that can feel safer emotionally than telling your partner what you need. Yeah. That's where the vulnerability is. It is easier to fume. And so that's what he called me on. And then with Tom, he said, "Get off your ass and help her out," which was, it was satisfying. I'm not going to lie. But at the end of our weekend intensive, he gave us homework. And he said, "What I want you two to practice," this is one of his tenets, "is full respect living." And I said, "Okay, what's that?" And he said, "Nothing that you do when you're interacting with each other should drop below the level of simple respect." And I thought, wait, what? I said, "So, no yelling?" And he said, "No." I said, "Swearing?" "No." And I said, "Okay, what about sarcasm?" And he said, "Sarcasm isn't respectful." I went through, this long list of things that I was doing.
All your go-tos.
Yeah. And he said, "No. And you have to try your hardest. And maybe you'll slip up sometimes, but this is what I want you to do." And that was also really impactful because it just made me realize how you can treat somebody that you love so badly.
Worse than a stranger sometimes. Like you'd be more polite to a stranger on the street.
100%.
Yeah.
And so we really, really tried this full respect living. And of course it can be done. And I said, sometimes I get sort of engulfed in my temper and I can't help it. And he said, "Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. You don't do that at work. You actually can help it. You have helped it." And I thought, oh, you know what? He's right. So we really worked on, the formula that therapists tell you to do when you're upset. Identify the problem. Here's a really mild one. Your towel is on the floor. And then talk about how it makes you feel. I feel bummed that the towel is on the floor. Talk about what you would like. I would like you to not put the towel on the floor. And to begin with I statements. I feel lousy when you do this, because that engenders empathy or sympathy, right? Instead of, you're an idiot or whatever you would say. So I statements, I know it's a trope in therapy, but it really does work. It immediately makes you more vulnerable and it makes the other person more empathetic.
And less defensive.
Yes, exactly.
You just gave us like a free therapy session. So I appreciate it. Those are all things that I am going to try. I mean, I think I'm a little better now that we're out of the baby stage. I think for me, like I get very overwhelmed when I am like a food source and dealing with, like being touched literally constantly and all of that. Like I have a shorter fuse. And my husband and I were both in therapy before our third was born so that we didn't repeat the things that we repeated during our second postpartum, which in my defense was also during COVID. So it was just a very stressful time in general. That's like my excuse, but no, but
that's your explanation. That's not an excuse. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot for both of us. And I'm glad that we were able to kind of repair it with our third baby. And like, we're so much happier now. But of course, this stuff still comes up. So what do you recommend for couples who are kind of in more of like the maintenance phase? Maybe they're not like in crisis as a couple, but like things do come up and resentments do kind of bubble sometimes. What are your recommendations for couples like that?
Okay. I remember I was at the gym once and I saw this hostage situation. It was some news story. And I was kind of amazed at how the hostage negotiators calmed down people in no time. And they got this person to surrender their weapon. It was like a bank holdup or something. And I thought, I'm going to see if anyone from the FBI will talk to me. So I talked to two crisis negotiation, these two people at the FBI who were, I'm trying to remember what the exact term was. It was like, one was the head of the crisis negotiation unit at the FBI for many, many years. And so he gave me this 8-step process that the FBI uses to calm down what they called an agitated individual, which would be, me. And right.
Always.
And so I thought, okay, well, that would work. So it is the 8 steps are, I still go through them all the time. And they really do disarm the other person. My husband Tom will use the techniques on me and I'll say, I know what you're doing. But then we laugh. It's funny. One is paraphrasing. So all you have to do is restate what the person is feeling in your own words. So you can say like, it sounds like you're really upset because X, Y, and Z. If you get it wrong, Tom would frequently get it wrong. He would say like, it sounds like you're really upset that a towel is on the floor. And I would say, it's not about the towel, but at least he was trying and it would be funny. So if you paraphrase what you're saying, Tom, when he was on his phone, he would do ghost voice with me where I would say, are you even listening to me? And he would repeat what I would say in a ghost voice. He would say, yeah, you're saying don't put your towel on the floor. But he wasn't actually listening to me. But when you're paraphrasing, you have to do that cognitive, process where you're actually listening to them and putting it in your own words. So that's one. Another is called emotion labeling. It's as simple as saying, you sound as though, you seem as if. The FBI guy said that he would say that as a way to, again, kind of engender sympathy, like, I hear you. He said that no matter what, in his decades in the FBI, people just wanted to be heard. And that's in relationships too. So another is simply offering minimal encouragement. So when a person's upset, you say, yeah, I see. If you're going, yep, the person can't get upset. It sort of takes the wind out of their sails. Another is mirroring. If a person's telling you something and they're kind of like, yeah, and I'm pissed, you say, and you're pissed. And you just feel this flood of oxytocin. Another is asking open-ended questions. You can say, could you tell me a little bit more about that? Everyone loves to tell you more about that. If you can ask that in a sincere way, using iMessages, as I mentioned before, I feel bad. Or instead of saying, don't scream at me, you could say, I can't hear you when you're screaming at me, and I'd like to know what you're saying.
Can I just say a lot of this sounds like negotiating with a toddler? And like parenting my 2-year-old. Like I do these things daily with her.
All you have to do is crouch down to their level and you can use the same things.
Perfect. Double duty.
Right? And the last one is allowing effective pauses. The FBI agent would tell me that sometimes they would let a little time pass and then the person would calm down because they sort of wanted to ascertain that the hostage unit folks were still listening. So if you can pause, not in a hostile way, not in a way that's, silent treatmenting them, but if you can just kind of like calm it down a little bit, sometimes they'll kind of tune back into you and kind of get off of that, rage cycle. So all 8 of those steps really help. The number one of all of them is definitely paraphrasing, because if you feel like they're understanding you, you're halfway there.
Yeah, understanding. And just like you said, just everybody wants to be heard and seen and understood, especially by their partner. This has all been so helpful. And the book is so, so great. You're so funny in the book and in person, as we've all learned through listening to this podcast. The last question I have is actually just, what did your husband think about this book and the title and all of that? Was he offended? Did he think it was a great idea?
Well, he writes books too. So he was wrestling with the prospect of me getting a book deal. So just from a coldly financial point of view, he thought,
he's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, like he kind of thought, well, that would help us out a bit. But also because he's a journalist, a fellow journalist, I guess, he said, if you're going to write this book, tell the truth. And that really made me happy. I thought, okay, he said, don't sugarcoat it. And at that point, when I was writing it, I didn't know if we were going to make it or not. And neither did he. And he said, you can't tie it up with a bow. It has to be real. So, you have my blessing. I'll need to read the manuscript, but, and he didn't change anything. It really amazed me. And I think it's because he had a journalism background. So he was kind of like, well, you can't write something fake. Right. And so that did help. But yeah, he took it better than I would, because there's the cover art of the hardcover. It looks like him. The artist took it from a picture of him. Oh yeah. So I would have put the kibosh on that. I'll tell you what.
Oh, yeah, never.
But he didn't.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
I give him props for that. That takes a very secure person. Yeah, if my husband told me he was writing a book about how to not hate your wife after having kids, I'd be like, yeah, that is not going to happen. So tell him thank you for all of us, because it is such a important and helpful and, like I said, funny at times book, and it can really, really help couples, especially like you said. Couples therapy is wonderful. Everybody should go to couples therapy if they can, but it's not always accessible. So there's a lot of discussion and tools in the book that can be impactful for couples both before and after having kids. So can you just tell us where to find the book and where to connect with you?
You can find the book anywhere. It's still on Amazon and all that stuff. I'm on Instagram, Jancee Dunn. I write the Well column at the New York Times. So there's that as well.
Perfect. I'll link all of that in the show notes for people to find as well. Jancee, this has been such a fun conversation, and you've made me feel a little bit less insane, and you've given me some really helpful tools that I'm sure my husband will appreciate as well. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.